Fright Night tells the story of a dorky little dude from a Las Vegas suburb named Charlie who, after his dirt bike craps out on him on his way to school, stops to say hi to his smoking hot neighbor across the street named Doris. After walking his bike home, where his mom complains to him about a dumpster full of mysterious rubble that their new next-door neighbor has in his driveway, Charlie's girlfriend Amy pulls up and offers him a ride to school, where when the teacher does the morning roll call, he notices a bunch of students are absent again, including one of his friends named Adam. So when Charlie's hanging out at his locker after class, one of his nerdy childhood best friends named Ed pulls him aside and tells him that he thinks it's a bit weird that so many kids are missing class and proposes that they go check on Adam after school. Charlie's not too keen on the idea because ever since he started dating Amy, he's become one of the cool kids, but he agrees to come along after Ed threatens to tell people about their dorky childhood shenanigans together. That night, when he gets home after a date with Amy, he finds his mom flirting in the front yard with their hunky new neighbor, Jerry. So after they go over and introduce themselves, Charlie gets a message from Ed threatening to spread their dorky childhood home videos around if he doesn't get his butt over to Adam's house. So Charlie immediately hightails it over to Adam's, where he and Ed proceed to break in after nobody answers the door. While they're snooping around, Ed tells him that his new neighbor Jerry is actually a vampire and says that he has hard evidence back at home and warns Charlie never to invite him over since apparently vampires need an invitation to be able to come inside. But Charlie's not really buying it, so Ed gets frustrated and tells him how much he's changed since he started going out with Amy, who he calls a skank, which doesn't go over too well with Charlie, who tells him that his life only started getting better after he quit hanging out with Ed. On that cheery note, they part ways, where on Ed's way home, he bumps into the school bully, so he hops a fence into a random backyard to get away, but ends up coming face to face with Jerry. So he breaks into the house thinking Jerry won't be able to follow him without an invitation, not realizing that the house is actually abandoned, so he doesn't actually need an invitation. So he runs upstairs and climbs out the window where Jerry is already waiting for him and ends up falling into the pool, where Jerry then uses his vampire Jedi mind tricks to lower Ed's guard and jump on his neck a bit. The next day, when Ed doesn't show up for class, Charlie heads over to his house after school, where he asks Ed's parents if he can go grab something out of Ed's room and proceeds to go snooping around on his computer, where he finds a website for a famous vampire hunter named Peter Vincent and also discovers some videos that Ed made while he was spying on Jerry, and to Charlie's surprise, Jerry appears invisible on the camera, proving that Ed was actually right about the whole vampire thing. After heading home, Jerry suddenly shows up and asks if he can borrow some brews since apparently he's got a date coming over and he's all out of beer. So Charlie nervously says yes and goes inside to grab the beer, and Jerry follows him to the door but doesn't come inside without an invitation, just as Charlie suspected. But while checking to see if he has any blood-flavored brews, he accidentally drops a beer on the floor and Jerry eagerly offers to help, but Charlie says no and Jerry realizes that old Chucky's onto him. So he cautiously hands Jerry the beer and then heads up to his room where Amy's waiting for him and tries to get a bit frisky, but Charlie gets distracted by the sound of the doorbell at Jerry's house. When he goes to take a look, he sees that Jerry's date for the night is actually Doris. But when Jerry looks up at him, Charlie spazzes out, which dries up an already irritated Amy, so she decides to leave Charlie alone to have fun spying on the neighbors. A bit later, he sees Jerry leaving alone, so he decides to hop the fence and break into his house to go looking for Doris. While he's snooping around, he finds a weird-looking symbol on the wall, so he decides to take a picture. But moments later, Jerry comes back, so he decides to hide in a closet where he discovers a hidden passageway filled with rooms. So he takes a peek inside one of the rooms and sees a terrified Doris. So he tries to pick the lock, but when he hears Jerry coming, he ducks into one of the other rooms and watches as Jerry drags Doris out to have a brief snack and then chucks her back inside. After he leaves, Charlie rescues Doris out of the room and helps her downstairs, where they manage to sneak past Jerry as he wanders from the TV over to the fridge. But as they sneak out of the house, Jerry watches them leave from around the corner with a sinister smile on his face, and right as they make it outside, Doris bursts into a pile of smoldering ashes. Traumatized, Charlie looks up that Peter Vincent vampire hunter guy from the website that he saw on Ed's computer. Before he leaves, he warns his mother that Jerry is dangerous and tells her to stay away from him. So pretending to be a reporter, he tracks down Peter Vincent rehearsing for one of his shows and asks him for an interview where, while he changes out of his costume, Charlie starts asking him questions about how to kill vampires. But when he tries to show him the pictures that he took in Jerry's house, Peter realizes that he's not a real reporter and thinks that he's just a crazy fan, so he kicks him out. So Charlie heads home, and after covering all the windows with crosses and garlic, he's carving up wooden stakes when Amy decides to come over and ask him why he's been acting so weird lately. But right as he's about to tell her, Jerry comes over and tries to get his mother to open the door by telling her about Charlie breaking into his house and threatens to go to the police. But Charlie begs his mom not to open the door, so she calls his bluff and tells him to go to the police. But instead of going to the cops, old Jerry goes to his garage and grabs a shovel and proceeds to dig up the gas line in Charlie's backyard and light it, blowing up the stove and setting the house on fire. So they all pile into his mom's van and escape the burning house, only for Jerry to catch up to them a few minutes later and block the road with his truck. So Charlie convinces his mom to just run him over, which also ends up backfiring on them a few minutes later when they realize that Jerry managed to cling onto the bottom of the van and comes bursting through the floor. But when his mom decides to stop the van in the middle of the road, another car plows right into them. And when the angry driver comes out and starts giving them shit, Jerry pops out from under the van all fully vamped out and proceeds to suck the dude dry in order to recharge his Colin Farrell costume. So Charlie decides to hop out with a big-ass cross and hold Jerry off while Amy and his mom run away. But once his cross idea literally goes up in smoke, Jerry tosses him against the van, and as he's getting ready to use one of Charlie's own stakes on him, he mocks how humans have a bad habit of missing the heart. And right at that exact moment, Charlie's mom decides to test out her aim by ramming a road sign through his chest. But as Jerry squeals and crawls off behind the van, Charlie's mom passes out from an apparent bump on the noggin she sustained in the crash. So they load her into the other guy's car and sideswipe the van on top of Jerry as they escape, which only seems to slightly slow him down since he starts to heal up almost instantly. When they get to the hospital, Charlie doesn't even bother telling the cops about the whole vampire thing since he knows they won't believe him. Meanwhile, Peter Vincent finally takes a look at the picture Charlie left behind and realizes that he wasn't crazy after all, so he calls up Charlie and tells him to meet him at his place in an hour. Where when they arrive, he tells them that the insignia in the picture belongs to a species that originated in the Mediterranean and that they like to keep their victims alive for days to snack on them, and says that it'll be pretty much impossible to kill it without an army. But all of a sudden, he gets a call saying that he has a delivery, so he sends his girlfriend to let them in, but it turns out to be a vamped out Ed who disguised himself as a delivery guy to be invited inside and proceeds to call Jerry and tell him where they are. So as the mighty vampire hunter scurries away to his panic room where Ed accidentally gets his arm lopped off by the door, Charlie and Amy try to find a way out, but after realizing that the elevator switch has been smashed, they hide behind a shelf and push it over onto Ed once he gets close enough. But Ed shrugs it off pretty easily, so Charlie tells Amy to go find a way out and then arms himself with an axe, and after missing the first couple swings thanks to Ed's supernatural gymnastics, he manages to catch him with it in the neck. And as Amy tries to find something to help Charlie with, Jerry finally shows up, so she throws a mug of holy water in his grill and takes the opportunity to escape while he's spazzing out. But an axe to the neck also barely slowed Ed down, so after breaking the axe and clumsily pinning him down with his one remaining arm and struggling to get a good chomp on old Chucky's neck, Amy knocks him off with a big-ass mace she found lying around, which gives Charlie the opportunity to poke him in the heart with one of his trusty stakes, which he ain't exactly thrilled about, but as Ed briefly turns back into his old self, he tells him that it's okay before being reduced to a pile of ashes. But when Charlie and Amy finally make it downstairs and into a club, they end up being separated by the crowd, where Jerry spots Amy from the rafters, so he jumps down and grabs her, and after lowering her guard with his vampire Jedi mind tricks, he proceeds to nibble on her neck a bit. But when Charlie tries to alert a bouncer, who ain't exactly buying that Amy's in any kind of trouble, he ends up getting kicked out for not having any ID. So he heads back upstairs to Peter Vincent's place to ask for help killing Jerry, where Peter confesses that he's never actually killed a vampire before and only started collecting vampire stuff when he was a kid and his parents were killed by a vampire. He says that the only reason he survived is because he had the good sense to hide, so that's what he's gonna do now. But before he leaves, he gives Charlie a special stake that was blessed by St. Michael that has the power to change back everyone who's been turned as long as the original vampire is killed with it, and recommends using fire to get close enough to use it since fire apparently weakens vampires. So Charlie stops by the local pawn shop and equips himself with some vampire-killing gear and then heads back to Jerry's house, where after opening up the windows to let some light in, he finds Amy in one of the hidden rooms, but she gets dragged through the floor before he can get to her. But when he runs downstairs to find her, he bumps into a slightly hammered Peter Vincent who's all decked out in vampire hunting gear. So together, they drop down into the floor where Amy disappeared and go looking around until they come to a door, not realizing that Jerry is hanging from the ceiling behind them, who pulls Peter back outside and locks Charlie in the room. So Peter tries shooting Jerry, which doesn't really accomplish anything, and Jerry decides to respond by chucking a pebble at him. But when the cut on his forehead draws a single drop of blood, suddenly a bunch of other people that Jerry turned into vampires who all went missing from the neighborhood start crawling out of the dirt, attracted by the smell of Peter's blood. So he tries to hold them off with a snake pistol that he bought on eBay, but like everything from eBay, it breaks after the first shot. Meanwhile, on the other side of the door, Charlie is finally reunited with Amy, only for her to get all toothy and try chomping on his neck, so Charlie pokes her with one of his stakes, but misses her heart on purpose to buy himself some time to pry open the door, where he finds the other vampires all chowing down on Peter, so he blasts some holes in the roof to let in sunlight, which helps for a little bit, but as Peter starts to turn into a vampire too, his finger starts to smoke. So when Amy wanders out and starts making out with Jerry, Charlie takes the opportunity to put on a mask and goggles and set himself on fire, and then goes and gives Jerry a big old bear hug, who proceeds to go thrashing around all over the place trying to get Charlie off of him, which ends up making an even bigger hole in the roof, burning Jerry even worse than the fire is. So while he's distracted, Peter tosses Charlie the special steak, which he then rams right into Charlie's heart, finally killing him once and for all, and turning all the other vampires back into humans. So with the supernatural shenanigans now over, our heroes regroup at Peter's place, where Amy thanks Charlie for saving her by finally popping his cherry.